when I first started doing the gimmick, and I never had this conversation with Vince, so that was my mistake. But everybody just, what does everybody want? What does everybody need? It's a double entendre, and I know it, but that was never what it was intended to be.
Yeah.
If you pay attention, you'll notice as I say it, I get angrier as I'm saying it. And the reason why is because in my mind, if anybody were in the position I was in, which the frustration of the lack of success, or what I felt was like lack of success, would drive me to have a nervous breakdown and be paranoid and schizophrenic, that here I want to be the star, and then when I go out, I say, what does everybody want? What does everybody need? What does everybody love? And they all chant head. It's making me mad. And the idea was that eventually I would get jealous and I would turn on the head. And I was going to have, where I'd attack it backstage, and everything that you would do if you were in an angle with another wrestler, I was going to do with the head.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the 55 Live podcast in conjunction with the WZWA Network. My name is Mr. 55, Jack Wallace, and I'm one of your co-hosts for this evening. Alongside with me tonight is Karlifornia in Viri. Carl, how are you doing tonight, my friend?
Oh, I'm doing great, bro, because what does everybody want? And we're going to get him right here. It's not Head, though. It's Al Snow. I'm very excited, Jack.
Of course, man. We do have Al Snow here with us tonight. And Al, how are you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
We're very excited to have you here tonight. We're extremely excited. It is 11:08 p.m. where we are here in Perth, Western Australia. What's the time over there where you are?
11:08 a.m. in the United States.
Whereabouts in the United States are you residing at the moment?
I live in Louisville, Kentucky. It's on the Eastern Standard Time Zone. So, awesome. We're exactly 12 hours, I think, behind you guys. So,
yeah, that's exactly 12 hours. So as usual with the 55 Live podcast, with all of our guests, we do like to start the show off by, talking to our guests about how they became a wrestling fan, their early life, just that sort of thing. What was the influence for you sort of getting into the business?
Well, I grew up in Ohio, in Northwest Ohio. And that would be back in the old regional territorial days. So that was Ed Farhat's territory, which was the original Sheik. He owned all of pretty much Michigan, Ohio, expanded over into Western Pennsylvania, down into Northeastern Kentucky, over into Eastern Indiana. He had a big, pretty massive territory, and it was always a prime territory. And the reason why is, especially in the state of Ohio, there were so many major population centers that were within 2 to 3 hour drives of each other. But at that time, because of the lack of the cable television and the internet, each one of those major population centers were, they didn't know what went on in, say, 2 hours away. So you could make the loop from one town to the next and pretty much hold the same show each night, and it would be a brand new, unique show for that particular area at that time. And you could draw, massive audiences in the 10 to 15,000 people in each one of those towns every single night, Monday through Sunday. So it was a very big money-making territory for a very long time. And it was a very prime spot for a lot of people wanting to try to steal it, try to make their way in. And I grew up watching that. Lots of different wrestlers over the years, names that you guys probably wouldn't even know who they were or recognize. But and then about 1976, around in that area, we had the advent of cable television, which I know is crazy for you guys because there was a world before that where they had no cable television, no cell phones, no internet, and WTBS with Turner Broadcasting came in on Saturday nights, and Georgia Championship Wrestling. Between that time, the Sheik's territory, Ed Farhat's territory, had went under, So there was really no wrestling, hardly at all. And then for a few years, and then it came in when I was about 12 or 13. I started watching that, and I made the decision when I was 14 years old. That was it. That was what I was going to do. I was going to be a professional wrestler. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That was going to be my career. And started trying to pursue it at that time, which wasn't easy. Again, no internet, no Google. So I had to physically, because I didn't have a driver's license at that point, walk to the public library, pull out some of the phone books for some of the major cities they had in the United States, because in the wrestling magazines back then, they would say where like the major promotional offices were located, what city. So I just went and found one for Minnesota, which was Minneapolis, which was where the AWA office was. And I looked through and found their phone number, and I went through and Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where Crockett Promotions was, Memphis, Tennessee, which was where the promotions for, Mid-South Wrestling, Jarrett and Lawler, and Eddie Graham in Miami or Tampa. And I just went and pulled every one of those phone books, looked up the offices, and then about once a month I would call them. And at that time, it was very hard. There weren't a proliferation of wrestling schools like there are now, where anybody could just walk in anytime, any place, and and you got the money, plunk it down, and hey, you're a wrestler. It wasn't that easy. And so I would call the offices, and after a while, they would just get to the point where they'd recognize my voice and either hang up on me, or if they were bored, they'd talk to me for a couple minutes, and try to talk me out of becoming a wrestler. And just kept doing that. Finally, when I was 18, I found a guy to train me, and I went from there to go on to have a 38-year career.
Awesome. That's probably the best way to summarize it, really. All that struggle, and you end up getting the big payoff with the awesome career, man. So that's what we're going to dive straight headfirst deep into this evening. But I wanted to sort of go back again to when you were trained. So correct me if you were wrong. You were trained by Ole Anderson. Is that correct?
No, I went to a tryout with Ole and Gene Anderson.
Right. Yep.
Then went to Charlotte, North Carolina. Before that, I'd met a journeyman wrestler who was just going into semi-retirement, wanting to start his own promotion by the name of Jim Lancaster. And Jim wasn't interested in training anybody. He tried to foist me off onto Al Costello up in Detroit, who was starting to just train some guys. He had no desire, because back then, it was a risk. You were held accountable for whoever you brought into the business. So if somebody came in and they did bad business, then it would result in you probably getting blackballed, or not being able to make a living. So guys weren't too keen on doing it. And they as a result, it was very, very difficult to get in. And that's what the term protect the business means. It's not what you guys think is kayfabe. That has nothing to do with protecting the business. Protecting the business was not letting anybody in it, because it only takes one person to kill the business. And so they were very, very reticent about letting just anyone in. So during all those phone calls, I'd gotten a hold of Gene Anderson in the Charlotte booking office in Crockett's territory, and he informed me that in October they were going to have a tryout. And I was like, well, I'm coming. And, sold my car and took a 24-hour bus trip down to Charlotte, North Carolina, walked 5 miles from the bus station out to the Charlotte Coliseum, and got basically tortured and beat up for several hours, and came back and watched the show that night, rode home, and went back and met Jim Lancaster again. He had just been starting running promotions himself, and was trying to do a show with, at the time, was a pretty top babyface in the area in the Midwest by the name of Spike Huber, who was Dick the Bruiser's son-in-law. And Dick went sideways on the deal. Jim had Spike booked, but Dick pulled Spike and sent him to St. Louis. And Jim was upset, so he went to his own crew of guys, and that's how he was willing to train me. And I got trained and had my first match May 22nd of 1982.
That was such a long time ago, man. It's so crazy, man. I like, and I was even looking around tonight. Like, I didn't even realize how long you have been wrestling for when I was doing some of my research. Absolutely insane, man. You've been working very long time. You're still working around today as well, aren't you? Like, here and there, some independent promotion.
Once in a while, yeah. Once in a while, I just don't have quite the same amount of time because of being involved so heavily with OVW and everything. The responsibilities with that are monstrous. So it's hard for me to take time away to go and to wrestle. But people still reach out, still contact me, and have an interest in wanting to bring me in and put me in the ring. So, and I'll do so. But I'm getting to a point where I think I just can't perform like I should. I can't move like I should. I don't like that. So I won't do it as much anymore.
It would be awesome to absolutely see you hit the 40-year mark, man. That'd be a huge milestone. That's a long time for any wrestler, man.
Yeah, true. It is.
I want to go to your 1993 run under the name of Steve Moore in the WWF. This would have been your first run there. How was that experience for you, sort of being on such a big stage for your first time?
Well, it wasn't a run. I wish it was even. It was just a couple days.
Yeah, fair enough.
I was brought in just simply as a job guy, which, for people that don't know what that means, or they misuse the term because they think job guy means that you lose all the time, which is not the case. Job guy in the old days, like if you were a wrestler and you were in the territory and you worked TV, they didn't pay you for TV. You made your money on the live events. And the reason they didn't pay you for TV was because it was an opportunity for you to sell yourself. So whether you won or lost on TV, now you were more of a factor in how many people showed up at the building, because when they put your name on a poster, they would recognize you from TV. There was where you made your money. If you were a job guy, they would bring you in just for TV. You didn't make money on the live events. You weren't booked there. And you just came in primarily to work those TVs, and usually you did 2 to 3 tapes a week. When they did them, they do 2 or 3 tapes at the time. So you do 2 to 3 weeks. So you might wrestle 2, 3, 4 times in one day. And it was a job. You were paid for a task because you were coming in for one day and then you were leaving. So hence the term job guy. It wasn't a derogatory term like all of you use now, like, oh, he's just a job guy because he loses. Winning and losing don't matter. What matters is what you do with the time when you're in the ring. And I would, go out to, came in to WWE at that time as an enhancement talent, as a job guy, basically. And I chose the name Steve Moore because I didn't want to use the name Al Snow to work under, because I was still working in other places as Al Snow, and I didn't want to, have that affect how well I drew in those places. It didn't behoove me to go in and work and be at the very bottom of the card where the promoters relied on me to be at the very top of the card for them elsewhere. So I used a different name. And it was fun. I mean, it was a fun couple of days, and I got to work with Taker and Marty for the first time, and Billy and Bart Gunn, and we had some good matches. And then that was the end of it. They didn't contact me again or anything like that. It was just a one and done, and moved on.
Before I throw it back over to Carlo, wanted to sort of speak about your time training with Dan the Beast Severin for his time at the UFC. What were the memories of your time being at the UFC because that was a time where it was very barbaric. It was much different to how it is today. What are some of your memories of being at the early UFC events?
Well, that's a big misconception that it was more barbaric, because it wasn't. It's actually a little more barbaric and a little more violent now, because they've changed the rules specifically because it's easier for you to relate to it. They try to create the rules to where the fighters stay more standing up for longer periods of time, thus striking each other more often. Back in the day, in real fights, 9 times out of 10, within about 10 to 15 seconds, somebody's going down on the ground. And then, it becomes a grappling contest. Strikes aren't as effective, nor are they nearly as damaging as they are if you're standing up. The power derived from a punch is the amount of speed you can throw it, so that it creates velocity, which creates power on the impact. It's like throwing a baseball or a cricket ball. Faster you can throw it, the harder it hits. You're down on the ground, it's kind of hard to throw it fast enough to really do any real damage. So it's a big misconception. But the UFC was dramatically different back then, in the sense that it was an actual tournament. You had to fight. If you won your first fight, you had to fight a second. And if you won the second, you finally fought the main event, which was third. And you did not know who you were going to face prior to going. Unlike now, where it's a singular opponent, with everybody has primarily a lot of the same style. They have a ground game, they have a stand-up game, striking, submissions. They all had that to some. They all have that now to some degree. It's become its own style. But back then, like when Dan went, the first guy he fought was a Muay Thai guy. Strictly was Muay Thai, and then the second guy was a long style karate, and then the third guy was Royce Gracie, which was jiu-jitsu. So there was no way to prepare. There was no way, we had no idea what we were getting into. The training camp wasn't. We were just making up stuff as we went along, and luckily, Dan's like a human grizzly bear. He can just go in there and maul people. And, being a part of it was very interesting. There were a lot of really interesting characters. They're even probably more eclectic and eccentric than some of the old time wrestlers are. They were pretty crazy. But being a part of that, created an opportunity for me with Jim Cornette and Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and, which got me an opportunity in WWF, and away we went. So.
Carl?
Righto. Al, I have to actually, Jack, I have to apologize to you. Because I was the one that did wrote the questions out. I was the one that wrote the word. I was the one that wrote the word barbaric. And
no, that's fine. I try, whenever I see or hear a misconception, I try to clear it up.
Yeah, fair enough.
That's in this day and age, there's a lot. It's very easy for people to take a misconception and create it into as if it's a fact, and propagate a misunderstanding into something that it actually isn't. And it's like, so for me, it's just a personal thing where I just always, if I hear something like it, I'm like, well, hold on. I know this is what you think. Now let's hear what the truth is,
Yeah. No, I totally get you.
I still found it to be a really interesting point, though. I'm not a big MMA, UFC guy or anything like that. Like pro wrestling has sort of been my taste in that. If you want to categorize all of them together, pro wrestling would be my sort of thing to go to. So I found it to be a really interesting take about the how the new UFC is actually much more brutal, or not more brutal, but barbaric than the old UFC, because all the fans and everyone hypes on and about how the old UFC was this and that, because you'd have a karate guy fighting a sumo wrestler or something ridiculous, and the sizes in comparison were just crazy. So to me, I thought as well that it was more quote unquote again barbaric. But I thought.
But that was the way that's the way they marketed it and they sold it at the time, which helped them draw. But then it ended up backfiring. That's what created such a backlash against them in the United States and got them banned from a lot of places and not allowed to run, was because they had created this perception that it was this ultra violent, and trust me, it is violent, but in a lot of ways, it's a lot safer than, say, a boxing match that goes 15 rounds where you're repeatedly taking, concussive shots to the head. It's, they're much shorter. The strikes aren't, nearly the same. It's not nearly as barbaric as they tried to make it out to be. So they were successful on one hand, but they ended up shooting themselves in the foot on the other with their marketing plan.
No, you made a very good point on that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like as soon as Al started, as you started explaining it, I'm like, oh, he is actually so right about that. Like you can only punch someone as hard as you can with a bare knuckle, only so many times before your hand's going to end up breaking on their head. So I mean, you got to find out other ways of beating them as opposed to having a glove on and being able to punch them as hard as you possibly can without having to pull back a little bit because it's not a bare fist. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wanted to fast forward a little bit to 1995 for your short stint in Extreme Championship Wrestling, wrestling the likes of Sabu and Taz, and a match that I remember watching years ago with you and Chris Benoit, which was one of them, from what I've read online, was one of the matches of the year of 1995. And it really was tremendous. Why didn't you stick around in ECW too long in 95?
One was because Paul didn't have any real plans for me, which is fine. But Jimmy had called me because around that same time was the UFC, and he had seen me and see me on that interview that Dan was supposed to do on the second fight. At the end of the second fight, and I got I can be a little bit of a sarcastic smartass and condescending. And he saw a personality, he saw a character, because at that time I had known Jimmy for many, many years, probably 10 or 12 or 13 years. And, he never had an opportunity or never had an interest in Smoky Mountain for me. And when he saw me that night on the pay-per-view, it just triggered something for him, and he reached out, and I told him, I said, hey, I'm already in ECW. Could I work both places? He said, yeah, I have no problem. I have no issue. I mean, you're more than welcome to work both places if it's cool with Paul. I said, okay, I'll call Paul, and I'll let you know. And I called Paul. I talked to Paul the next time I was at the show, and I said, Paul, I got this opportunity in Smoky Mountain. So that's great, terrific. And I said, yeah, Jimmy says he has no issue with me working both places if you don't. He goes, no, not at all. I said, okay. And then he just never booked me ever again. So
I could see that coming.
Yeah. So he was all fine with it, but he never booked me again. So.
Speaking of your time with Smoky Mountain, you ended up being tag partners with Kane, who was known as Unabomb at the time, and you got to work quite extensively with the Rock and Roll Express. How was that experience for you?
I was awesome. It was, and if I knew then what I know now, I could have capitalized more on it, and really could have taken really more advantage of it and gotten even more heat as a heel. But, I was focused on the wrong things, looking in the wrong places, and, trying to go out there and have a great match as opposed to becoming a great attraction and drawing more money. A lot of the same mistakes I see a lot of people making today. But it was awesome. I mean, it was so easy. It was so much fun. It was every night we go in the ring and just have so much fun.
Cool. Yeah. And it's crazy to see, last year, I believe it was, when the Rock and Roll Express win the NWA World Tag titles again after all these years. Still going, and they're still good. They really are still good.
They're great. They're not good. They're great.
Yeah.
I mean, they know, what Ricky is like, just the epitome of an amazing worker. What the real word worker means, not what you guys call it, but what it really intones. He really is the epitome. And Robert too. Robert's brother, Ricky Gibson, was in the business prior to Robert, and Ricky was really a good hand, and passed that on to Robert. And Ricky Morton, his dad, had been in professional wrestling as a wrestler and a referee, and so Ricky grew up around the business and has been in it for a lot longer than me. So
absolutely. After your time with Smoky Mountain, you signed with the WWF in '95. And you almost follow a similar path to Kane, who gets signed at the same time, being thrown into various different gimmicks like Avatar, Shinobi, and Leif Cassidy and the New Rockers, whilst Kane is given Fake Diesel and Isaac Yankem. If you had to keep 2 of these gimmicks and kill 3, what would you choose?
2 and kill 3? But I think I only had 3. I had Leif Cassidy and Avatar.
I meant counting Kane's gimmicks as well.
Oh, counting Kane's gimmicks. Oh, the fake Diesel thing worked really well for Glenn. Glenn, actually, Glenn started getting it over.
Yeah.
And started making it work. It wasn't the right thing to do business wise, because all it did was call attention more to Kevin Nash and Scott Hall and what they were doing in WCW.
Yeah.
That was the only downside for that. But it was starting to get over. The Avatar gimmick, like if I knew then what I know now, I could have done much more with it and the opportunity that it presented. But it just, I went from being a heel, and I'm not making excuses, but I went from being a heel for 14 years and just recently having a run as a smart ass chicken shit, running my mouth kind of heel, to now becoming this mysterious babyface that carries a mask out, puts it on, and then transforms. And Vince gives you these gimmicks, these characters, because he's trying to create a definable personality so that the audience can connect with you. They can describe you. They can know who you are. And, then that's the most important thing. And without that, you don't have anything. And, it's up to you to make them. It's up to you to take it and, use your artistic freedom to try to, put it together to where it make it work.
Yeah.
And I didn't with Avatar, and Leif Cassidy worked. We had a good run. It just that when Marty, as far as the team is concerned, Marty didn't have his heart into it. Really didn't have full interest because, and I don't blame him. I mean, he felt like it was not doing the respect to what he and Sean had done, and I got it, understood it. So, it had its run, and then it died off, and Marty left, and I was left on my own, and again trying to come up with that definable personality. That's the hardest thing to learn, and sometimes it takes the longest to figure out. But when you do, that's when you really start to make money.
Right. I mean, and at this point, you've been established now. You're not wearing a mask, so you're established now as Leif Cassidy, and you're in the New Rockers. But then, as you mentioned, Marty did leave the company. Were you worried about your job security at that point, and where they were going to be able to go with you now that you were kind of defined as being a member of the New Rockers?
No, not at all, because I had started taking the Leif Cassidy because of my own bad attitude and my own frustrations at the time, and me pointing the finger at everybody else instead of taking the blame on myself.
Okay.
I was developing a really shitty attitude, and that frustration and stuff I started manifesting in the Leif Cassidy gimmick, and and so I was taking it in a whole different direction anyways, so it didn't matter. I felt confident that I could still do what I needed to do. That was the problem.
Right.
So that I felt frustrated and felt like I could do what I needed to do, and I felt like they weren't giving me the opportunity when every time I went to the ring, they were giving me the opportunity. So, it took a while and a lot of time and distance to finally, and maturity, to figure that out.
Right. Jack, take us to ECW, my friend.
Yeah, you returned to ECW shortly after the loan from the WWF. Now, you're just talking about a definable personality. You came to ECW with the gimmick we all remember and know to love, and that's the Al Snow with head. How excited were you to return and to really sink your teeth into this gimmick?
Well, I didn't have the gimmick when I came there. I just was still Leif Cassidy to a degree, but I went back as Al Snow because that audience knew who I was as Al Snow. And it took me a while to pick through and try to figure out how to show that I had suffered like a nervous breakdown. And that the head gimmick, I mean, I knew when I tried to quit WWF, and at the time, and they rolled over my contract and wouldn't let me quit. And I was, I got through the grace of, my friend Chris Candido going to Paul Heyman and Paul Heyman going to Bruce Pritchard. And, they put me on loan basically over there. And,
Awesome.
That allowed me, I went there with the intent that I was going to develop myself and get myself back over to where either, Vince would pay to get me back, or Paul would pay to keep me, or Eric Bischoff would pay to take me away. And through the grace of God and a plastic head, I was able to do it. So,
what lessons did you learn in ECW that would help you in your career later on?
Those lessons didn't really manifest and come to be until I was much older and started training other people more frequently. And that is, the biggest lesson is that Paul had no plans for me. Paul did not get me over. I got me over. And then Paul capitalized on it. And that's what Vince does. And that's what every promoter does. And this belief that all these wrestlers hold that, all I have to do is just go to WWE and Vince will make me a star is ridiculous. Yeah. They don't. They'll give you the platform. They'll give you all the tools. They'll make it very possible for you to make yourself a star, but you make yourself a star. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, because, I know that you'll hear, and I'm sure you interview lots of wrestlers and oh, so-and-so held me back and so-and-so did this to me. I used to have the same attitude. But at the end of the day, when you walk through the curtain, you walk through the curtain, there's nothing anyone can do to help you, and there's nothing anyone can do to hold you back. It's 100% on you as to how you connect and interact with that audience while you're out there, and you utilize that time in the ring to its fullest potential and sell your product, which is you. That's 100% on you. No ifs, ands, or buts. And the more successful you are at that, and the more creative you are at that, the more you give the wrestling promoter something to capitalize on and promote. And if you don't, well, what do you want to do?
Exactly. Accountability is also, it's a very important thing. Do you have any sort of stories of bad things happening to Head over the years? Bit of a sidebar there.
No, nobody really bothered Head. Nobody really, surprisingly, nobody really touched it. Nobody really touched them. They which thank God, because, if you didn't have any arms or legs and a stranger picked you up, you'd scream like a banshee too. So, every time anybody would come near him, they'd freak out. I'd hear it no matter where I was in the building. So
I know that when Perry Saturn had Moppy, a few bad things happened to that mop.
Yeah, I'm sure they probably did. Yeah, but Head was never violated. So
thank God.
Thank God.
Yeah.
How did it come about that you were brought to? Sorry, how did it come about that you were brought back to bring this character to WWF TV?
Vince Russo contacted me. He had seen the vignettes and things that I had done. Those were what really got me over. It wasn't the stuff I did in the ring. It was the vignettes.
Yep.
Where I got to show my personality, and what I did was I ultimately created a character that you could turn to your friends and family and go, hey, there's this guy. He's A, B, C, D, E. That was what I'd always been missing, and except for that run in Smoky Mountain. And once I achieved that, then that gave Russo an idea of what he could do with it and the stories he could tell and interactions and things like that. So he reached out to me, and I told him, I said, no, I don't want to come back. I have no interest. I'm happy where I'm at, and
wow.
I'm going to send in my request for my release for my contract again, which I did 90 days in advance, like it's supposed to. And then we were in Florida. I was staying at Jerry Lynn's house in Orlando, and the show came on, and we had the opening of the show. They had a brand new opening of the show, and I don't care what Paul. Oh no, that's not true, which is BS. It was a brand new opening of the show, and a lot of what you want to try to do is promote or highlight the stars of the show, the people that are really over that you've got plans for. I was nowhere on that show, opening of the show, and I was like, well, I can see where this is going. Once I put over Shane, I can see this, my shelf life here is not going to be anymore. So I called Vince Russo back up. And at that, I sent him a videotape of all the stuff I had done that he showed Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon called me, and I came back in, and that was it.
Awesome. So it doesn't take long, obviously, for around the time, you know, the Attitude Era head, you know, goes hand in hand. It doesn't take long for the character to get established on TV. So what was the creative process like sort of back then, and how's that changed over the years?
Well, the only thing that's really changed is that, you know, you were more free back then. You know, it was your responsibility, and you know, from what I understand, because I don't know, I'm not up there anymore. But now, I mean, a lot of what they do is very scripted, especially the promos and things like that. And back then, it was 100% your responsibility. They'd, you know, I've spoken about this before. It's partly my responsibility because I didn't ask questions, but at the same time, they never really communicate. They never communicated to me anything. And when I mean anything prior to me arriving at TV. Like, I never knew what I was going to do at TV until I showed up that day. Never, the entire time I was there. You know, and I wouldn't hear until sometime that afternoon, oh, you're doing this tonight. I can clearly remember when we did the Pierre thing with the deer head and all that, which, you know, I just went out San Diego one time and they had a swap meet out there around the arena, the parking lot. I bought the deer head and started, you know, doing some vignettes with it, and, you know, it just took off. And, you know, the next thing you know, you know, it becomes a whole thing. And I show up in Orlando after Bob Holly had destroyed it, and Russo walks up and goes, "Hey, you're going to have to do a eulogy for the deer head." And I'm like, "What?"
Yeah, I remember this.
He's like, you know, so, you know, I'm out there on live TV for probably what, I think I did the eulogy for probably 8-9 minutes or something, you know. And when you think about it, you know, how much 30 seconds of television time costs, you know, they're giving me 8 or 9 minutes to do a eulogy for a deer head. And, you know, that's a lot of money, you know, and no phone call, no heads up, no, hey, just giving you the last minute. I would walk in. I remember I was doing Tough Enough in LA, and they called me like the Friday before, "Hey, we need you in Atlanta. You're going to, you know, you got to host Sunday Night Heat, and then you're working with Christian for the Intercontinental title in the opening match." I go, "What?" Yeah. So literally, you know, I get that call Friday night, so that Saturday night I fly in Sunday morning, go right to the building. I've got my tights on underneath my clothes when I'm doing commentary for Heat. I run to the back, pull them off, throw on my boots, and walk right out and do the first match on the pay-per-view in Atlanta.
Shit.
So,
oh, God.
You know, and nobody would ever call me. Nobody would ever speak to me. You know, they just stick you in there. You know, nowadays, I guess they really go through a lot and produce a lot I think they overproduce it. Really.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
I think they really overproduce it, but that's a lack of confidence in, you know, the talent, and the talent knowing what they need to do and being able to pull it off. But unfortunately for the audience, it doesn't allow for a talent to really be who they really are and connect with the audience in a way that the talent back in the day used to.
Just too much red tape these days. It just seems like someone's got an idea. By the time it gets through the 8 levels that it needs to get through before it gets the final say, it's already been changed a million times.
Well, that's why it's better to ask for forgiveness than it is to ask for permission.
Absolutely.
Because once you get out there, it's your show. You can do anything.
Yeah.
But it better be good, and it better work, and it better do business. Because if it doesn't, you're not going to get the opportunity again to do it a second time.
Yeah.
But guys are now, I feel I'll say something. I always try to say something controversial on every one of these interviews I do, so that it helps to create interest and drive someone to want to watch it.
No, appreciate that.
And here's the one for today. Okay.
Go on.
I think that one of the biggest mistakes in professional wrestling is the advent of the guaranteed or downside guaranteed contract. Here's why. In wrestling, in entertainment, okay, the only value you have no ifs, ands, or buts about it, is if I put your name on a poster, or a promoter puts your name on a poster, let's say, how many tickets is just your name? No one else, not wrestling, nothing. How many tickets is just your name going to sell? If the answer is none, that's what you're worth. Okay? Don't care what you think. I don't care how good you are. I don't care how many moves you can do.
Yeah.
If no one will buy a ticket to see you, then your value is zero. Simple as that. And the problem is that in wrestling, once you get, let's say, that downside guarantee, which really is the best way to do it, because now the talent are guaranteed they're going to make at least X amount of money a year, but potentially they're unlimited to make who knows what. But for the talent, what happens is they now start to think of it as a job, and that they have something to lose if they make a mistake. So they don't take any risks. They don't take any chances. They're not, fearless, because, they're no longer, hey, I've got everything to gain and nothing to lose. They've got something to lose. They've got that downside guarantee to lose. Where if they just go out and they play it safe and they do what they're told, they're going to just keep plugging right along. Whereas if they're, like, hey, if I don't make something of myself, I don't create something of myself, if I don't make myself a star, I'm not going to make any money. If I'm not going to make any money, I'm going to starve. So there's a whole different mindset between the two. And I think that giving performers a little bit of that cushion, that belief that they have a safety net, that now they have a fear of losing, hampers them, limits them. And if there was some way that you could do both, you could really impress upon a talent that downside guarantee is just a bottom rung, and you've got no end of limits, it'd be fine. But the problem is that too many, and even including you guys, you sit there and you believe whenever you hear, WWE released a talent, you go, oh, he got fired. You can't fire wrestlers. They're not employees. It's not Walmart, and that's the problem, is that today a lot of these younger wrestlers believe that they're entitled to a certain amount of pay. They're entitled to things in general. They're entitled to respect. And I can tell you, after 38 years, if I'm in a wrestling card, I'm not entitled to anything. I'm not entitled to get paid. I'm not entitled to respect. I ask for a certain amount of money. And you know why I ask for a certain amount of money? Because of my exposure and length of time in the business. I know that there are a certain number of people that will recognize my name in any given area around the world. So that means I have a certain value no matter where I go, as opposed to just the average guy that hasn't had that kind of exposure for that long. That's what makes it different. When I first started out, I was plus one other match, or I was additional all-stars, or, other exciting bouts. My name wasn't even on the poster. So as a result, nobody in that building showed up to see me. So my value was literally nothing. Okay. And if that's the case, because too many guys limit themselves in their opportunities these days because they feel like they're entitled to get paid a certain amount of money without actually going and taking advantage of the opportunity that's presented to them and making themselves into an attraction that now is worth that amount of money they say they are. And it's too bad. Which then conversely, when they go and they get to WWE, they get a downside guarantee contract. They start thinking, because it's a guaranteed check every 2 weeks, that it's like working at Walmart, when nothing could be further from the case. It's not working at Walmart. You're only worth how many tickets you'll be able to sell. And Vince is putting an investment in you, and he's expecting to get that money back plus. And if he can't, that's when you end up getting released. And not to mention, you have such an incredible platform that you can make yourself such an attraction that even when you get released from WWE, you can still have a career for years and years and years on your own, if you use the time when you were in WWE to its best, to its fullest advantage, as opposed to just riding through and thinking, okay, I'm just going to get paid. I'm going to get this check.
Yeah.
So it's too bad. But now that might upset some people. that I said that, which is good because then that'll make people want to watch.
Yeah.
I think a lot of young wrestlers should listen to that and take a lot from it and learn.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. It's a skill in life that is one of the most important skills you guys have to learn, is learn how to listen and tell you how few know how to do it. I own OVW, and I tell every one of them the same thing, and that is I don't like giving advice because if you're smart enough, I don't need to tell you. And if you're dumb enough, you ain't going to listen anyways.
Very good. Carl, you're up.
All right. Well, this next part I'm very excited to hear your thoughts on because I'm wearing the shirt. You soon formed the Job Squad with Bob Holly and Scorpio, and later joined by Gilbert and the Blue Meanie. How did this idea come about? And when you look back, how do you feel about that group's run together?
Well, the Job Squad started with me just being a smartass in WWF and in the catering room with Jim Cornette one day, and I just made a joke about, and again, this was during my bad attitude period, about the fact because everybody had a gang, they had the Los Boricuas, you had all these different gangs, and that were on TV. You had the Hart Foundation, Los Boricuas, and everybody had a faction. And I was like, well, Jimmy, I'm going to start my own gang. And he's like, what are you talking about? I go, I'm going to start the most powerful gang here. He goes, huh? I'd go, call it the Job Squad. It's going to be me, Barry Horowitz, Chris Candido, Just Incredible. I had about 4 or 5 guys. And he goes, you're out of your mind. I go, we're going to be the most powerful guys here. He goes, how's that? I go, okay, here's how it works, buddy. Because I was getting pissed because there were a lot of people up there that had forgotten that the only reason you win is because I let you. Or somebody told me to let you. So they actually thought they were winning, And I said, Undertaker goes out there and tombstones Barry. Barry gets up and dusts off his head and walks out. Who had the power in that match? I said, exactly. I said, because there's too many people here that think that they're really winning and we're really losing. And that ain't the case. I said, so it kind of took off and it was just a joke, and Meanie and I kept joking about it, because I stay in contact with Meanie all the time. He's like a little brother to me. And I went to ECW, and Candido knew about it, and they're all like, you need to make t-shirts. And I'm like, I don't know if I don't know about that, guys, because there's still part of me in there. I was like, but to the fan base of ECW, which is a marginal or niche fan base, I was like, okay, it works. So I made shirts, and with Jeff Jones. Jeff Jones was awesome. He helped out. He helped me with it. Back then, it was like the start of the internet, really, and we sold T-shirts on the internet and at the shows. I think probably between May of that year and October, because around October, November, I went back to WWE. I must have sold probably 3,000, 3,500 T-shirts at $25 a shirt, which is impressive.
Yeah.
But I use this as a good example to explain to young wrestlers. Do you want to be Al Snow Job Squad successful, or do you want to be Steve Austin T-shirt successful? In a short amount of time, I sold about over 3,000 T-shirts at $25 a shirt. That's before internet commerce even started. That was where people had to mail me a physical check. I had to deposit the check and then physically mail them back a T-shirt. Okay. Or I sold them at the shows. In that time, I sold that many T-shirts, and it was so popular that WWE licensed the Job Squad, wanting to market it for me. The issue was they had no idea how to sell it to a general audience, because it was strictly a wrestling audience-based merchandise idea. Only people who were real and hardcore wrestling fans, smart fans, would understand what it was. So you have Steve Austin, who has shirts in every major outlet store in the United States. Or you have Al Snow's shirts that sold a large amount in a very short amount of time, but only to a very niche audience. And the same goes for you as a wrestler, is do you want to market yourself in a way that attracts just the wrestling fan, or do you want to market yourself to where you attract and become successful with the general audience? You have control over that. Yeah. That's up to you. Too many choose to just be get the immediate gratification and try to market themselves to the wrestling fan. So when I came up to WWE, like, they wanted to license it, and Vince Russo wanted to use the idea on TV. But the problem was, how do you use a smart idea in front of a general audience and use it correctly and logically? You can't, and without exposing the business. And then, and this may come as a surprise, guys. I've said this 100 times before, but, just here in the United States alone, people since the 1920s had known that wrestling was predetermined. They still showed up in droves, in thousands, by the thousands, to pay to watch it because they could believe in the lie. They could believe that it was a competitive situation, that the outcome wasn't predetermined, that we didn't know who was going to win, and that the loss and win actually had some kind of consequence to it. And that's quickly spread all over the rest of the world. People still pay to see it, no different than they do magic, because if you're not a complete imbecile, you understand that magic is not real. They're not defying the laws of physics or gravity, but they are so good at what they do that while you're watching the show, you can sit there and be in awe and amazed and really question, well, maybe what are they doing? I don't know. And professional wrestling is much the same way. So when you have a gimmick like the Job Squad, you can't cross the line, but then at the same time, in order to do it right, you have to. And therefore it just didn't work. And they put us all together because they didn't have anything to do with the other guys, and at the time didn't have plans. They wanted to try to work it together to where they maybe could get a rub, and we could generate something. But we were stuck in where we were to be rebels but couldn't rebel, because if we rebelled, we'd have to cross that line and explain why we're rebelling.
Right. Interesting. I really enjoyed everything that took place on TV at the time, with the group, especially, as it started to wind down and was now breaking up with your joining of the hardcore division and going for the hardcore championship. And we're interviewing Bob next week, actually. And I'd just love to hear your thoughts on those matches that you two had together, and especially the one where you ended up in the Mississippi River. And I assume there was probably significant shrinkage.
Oh, it was cold. Yeah. That was probably one of the dumber ideas I came up with, because at the time when I was walking around in that afternoon, it was the Mississippi River. Everybody still talks about it to this day, which is cool. That afternoon in February, I walked around, and in the afternoon outside, I was out there without a coat on. So I thought, wow, it's warm, and I saw the river, and, I would go in the afternoon, and I'd show up, and they'd do, oh, you got to do a hardcore match tonight. And then, I'd have an agent walk around with me, and so that we could tell the cameras in the truck where we were going. And I'd try to put things in places that looked organic and weapons wise and looked natural, like it just happened to be there. You pick it up and use it. And I'd always try to build it in a fashion to where it culminated at a high point. And that day I knew that going into the river would be the high point. So luckily I had the foresight. There was an old tire there on the bank. I threw it in, and in the river, and it saved my life, because when I took the backdrop in the river, as soon as I hit, I was trying to put my feet down. I was like, holy crap, this is a lot deeper than I expected. And it was freezing cold. Then Bob got in with, we got in there with me, and we were fighting. And then Bob sometimes, he's awesome. I love working with Bob. He's aggressive, and he's intense, and he won't back down, and you can be aggressive with him. And, but he gets sometimes wired up, and like he was grabbing me by the back of the head and stuffing my head into the water repeatedly, like he was drowning me. He didn't realize it, but he was, that is how you drown people, is by putting them under, up. So I had to, thank God the tire was right there. So if you see, you'll watch me grab a hold of the tire, and like I hit him as hard as I can right in the solar plexus, and like, stop, you're killing me, and he damn near drowned me. But but we had a lot of fun doing those matches, and a lot of stupid shit that we did, that unnecessary risks and things that both of us took, but it was the spot that we had, and we wanted to make it as good as possible, and we had a good time. We had a lot of fun.
Cool, man. One other thing before I throw it back over to Jack, I just want to say that I really love the match that you had against yourself. That was that's great television. Do you have any story behind that and how that came to be and how you thought of it?
Yeah, the whole thing is, when I first started doing the gimmick, and I never had this conversation with Vince, so that was my mistake. But everybody just, what does everybody want? What does everybody need? It's a double entendre, and I know it, but that was never what it was intended to be.
Yeah.
If you pay attention, you'll notice as I say it, I get angrier as I'm saying it. And the reason why is because in my mind, if anybody were in the position I was in, which the frustration of the lack of success, or what I felt was like lack of success, would drive me to have a nervous breakdown and be paranoid and schizophrenic, that here I want to be the star, and then when I go out, I say, what does everybody want? What does everybody need? What does everybody love? And they all chant head. It's making me mad. And the idea was that eventually I would get jealous and I would turn on the head. And I was going to have, where I'd attack it backstage, and everything that you would do if you were in an angle with another wrestler, I was going to do with the head, and eventually end up wrestling the head by myself. And and I remember we were in Arizona when we did that. It was a pre-tape. Prior to me wrestling myself, it was a pre-tape, and Vince Russo again just came and grabbed me, and he goes, "Hey man, we need to film this. I want you to be angry with that you can't get anybody to wrestle you, this and that." And he goes, "What do you want to do?" And I go, "I'm going to wrestle myself. If nobody's going to wrestle me, I'm going to wrestle myself." So I proceeded to throw myself all over the room and, shoot myself in the face with a fire extinguisher, which those things are freaking cold.
Yeah, it's great, man. It's great.
And then the next TVs, he sent me out there to do it, wrestle myself out there in the ring. And, and people loved it. So.
Champagne television, Al. Champagne television. I'm telling you, I loved it. Back to you, Jack.
Yes, your next feud was with the Big Bossman, which was infamous with your new friend, the Chihuahua named Pepper. Tell us, in your version, the life of Pepper, in real life, behind the scenes, and what happened afterwards.
Well, there's not much. I mean, the dog was a sweet little dog, but it was not. Here, I've had this. I've told this story numerous times lately, and I never said it before. And the only reason it's infamous is because Mick Foley made fun of it, and brings it up. When Vince Russo came to me with the idea, he had laid it all out all the way up to, the final match. And I said, okay, so are you willing to do it? And I go, sure. Because one of my biggest mistakes was I never said no. And I should have a lot of times. And I said, I have no problem doing it. But we have to have highly trained animals. Like even Pepper, you can't just give me a dog to interact with that can't interact. That's not trained. I have to have highly trained animals. Oh yeah. We're going to make sure of that. So listen to me very carefully. From the day one, I'm emphasizing that we have to have highly trained animals. Yep. Okay. So a week or two later, we show up in Detroit, and Russo shows up, and there's this Chihuahua. And what did they do? They basically just called a veterinarian clinic, got a list of owners that had a Chihuahua, and got some lady to bring her Chihuahua puppy. So that was it. So this dog's never been taught, never been trained. It's never been in front of an audience.
Yeah.
And the poor animal, I felt so bad for it, because every time the pyro would go off, it'd piss in my hand, it'd crawl all over me. I'm shaking all the time. Ray, God love him, he'd rip me because I'd have it in my hand. He'd come in and he'd bang the steps purposely with his nightstick so the dog would freak out and piss in my hand. But I felt bad for the dog, because the dog wasn't conditioned.
Yeah, I remember watching on TV seeing it shake.
Yeah, it wasn't conditioned to be, it wasn't trained, and it wasn't conditioned to be around in that environment. You know, and at one point they were talking about buying the dog for me, and, you know, I was like, God, please don't do that. I don't need to travel with this thing on the road. And so you know, every week, I swear on my kids' lives, every week I'd show up at TV and, hey, Russo, you know, we've got to make sure we have trained animals for this, you know, Kennel from Hell match. We got to have trained animals.
There you go.
Oh yeah. We got to have trained animals. Yeah, we're going to make sure. I go, okay, you understand, when I mean trained animals, I mean you need all of the dogs from the same training facility, and they need to be under verbal commands, where a person standing, because my vision of this was the trainers standing outside of the cell, yelling into the dogs the commands, and the dogs going on attack mode. So they would be like sharks circling the cage, you know. And he's like, oh yeah, we got it, man. Don't you worry. We're gonna have trained dogs. I go, okay. I said, well, you know, we're building the entire crux of the story around the dogs. We need trained dogs. Yeah, we got it. Okay. So this went on for months. You know, the whole angle went on for months. Now, they put a lot of time into it. And we get to that Sunday in Charlotte. I'll never forget. I walk in, and there are 10 people with 10 different dogs standing back there. And I go put my bags in, my stomach, and literally just sunk to the pit of my stomach. You know, I walk around, I'm asking, hey man, hey, what are you doing? How's your dog? You know, one dog out of 10 had some obedience training. That was it.
Wow.
So, you know, you've built the entire crux of the story around these dogs, and, you know, they're now in the owners are on leashes with them in the cell, so they're not threatening. You built the entire story around them, that you know, you're going to, you know, these dogs are going to be a danger, and you can't even show them on TV because they're urinating, defecating, and fornicating so much that they're not even paying any attention to us in the ring.
Oh my
So
God.
of course, what a shock that, you know, the match was not good, because you've just built a story all around one particular item that you can't interact with or utilize at all. You know, and you know, it's your responsibility as a wrestler. Your job is to take shit and make shoe polish, no matter what the situation is, and no matter what you're put in. But I got to be honest, like that was a no-win situation. And what's funny is I'm the only one that anyone holds accountable for it. You know, there was another person that was in the ring with me, and he was just as much a part of the match, and unfortunately for him. But you know, everybody wants to bring it up to bust my balls about, you know, because Mick's the one that, you know, made a big deal about it. But it was just, we were put in a very bad situation.
Yeah.
Speaking of Mick, what was your favorite joke that Mick Foley had made about you in his books?
Any of them. Okay. You know, he can continue to do that to the day he dies. All he does is he just keeps putting me over, you know, just makes people aware of my name.
Very good point.
I could care less. I mean, that's, you know, feel free, you know.
Back to you, Carl.
This was a random question that I wanted to ask you. The WWF Attitude video game featured yourself and Head as a playable character. Wanted to know if you were paid royalties for the fact that Head was a playable character.
Probably not, I'm sure. Not unless I go and force the issue. I probably wasn't.
Fair enough.
You teamed with Steve Blackman in 2000 as the ultimate odd couple tag team, Head Cheese, and it seemed to get over pretty well. You know, what are your fondest memories of working with someone like Steve Blackman?
Steve's an awesome guy. He's a really awesome guy. And he was a great straight man. You know, and the most fun we had and what really got us over were all the vignettes that we did backstage.
Yeah.
That was what, you know, that was great. I mean, we had so much fun doing those things with Brian Gewirtz, and, you know, and it was legitimately, like, because they could even back then they could judge, you know, segment wise what was getting the highest ratings, and every week on SmackDown we were getting the highest ratings in those little segments. Like, people were watching those more than they were anything else.
Was it did you ever really pop Steve with your backstage stuff and make him laugh? Because it seems like he's
Oh,
the kind of guy
sometimes,
that will
yeah.
be very difficult to make laugh when he's on
He's
camera.
he's very hard to make laugh. He's really hard to make laugh. Yeah, he is. And that's what made it so much fun, was because he takes everything so seriously. And, I don't take anything seriously. So, so putting the two of us together was what made it so funny and entertaining. So, I had a great time with him. He's an
Excellent.
awesome guy.
Yeah, cool, man. You have a European Championship reign where you really embraced Europe each and every week, which was pretty fun. But soon after, you really start to sink your teeth into Tough Enough as head coach. I want to know, like, in a nutshell, what your best and worst experiences were working on that show.
There were no real bad experiences. I mean, the days were really long. We'd probably do 13, 14, 15-hour days, but
Was this where you
in
realized your
general,
true calling? Like you found?
I'd had a training school before that, and
Yeah.
in Ohio, and had done really well with it, and so I've trained a lot of people. I've been helped start a lot of careers, and or helped refine them and help them along.
Yeah.
Quite a few. I mean, when I really think about it, but I don't really talk about it. But it was, a time where that was probably one of the more happier times and proudest things I've done in wrestling, was being a part of that.
Wow.
I think that it was such a positive infomercial for professional wrestling. It was such a great vehicle for talent scouting and for creating and expanding the audience of professional wrestling. Still to this day, I have so many people come up and go, either A, I was never a wrestling fan until I watched you on Tough Enough, and then I became a wrestling fan, or B, my wife or significant other was never a wrestling fan until all they would watch is Tough Enough, and then they wanted to watch wrestling because of the kids from Tough Enough. It was unfortunate that, there was MTV wanted to make a move to where they owned all of their programming at the time, so they could, make more of the ancillary money and that they aired. And, there was a big contingency within the WWE office that was politicking against the fact of using Tough Enough, claiming that it somehow exposed the wrestling business, which nothing could have been further from the truth, because it didn't. We took great pains to make sure that it didn't.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is, like, one of WWE's biggest competitors is UFC. And the only reason that it had the big, even Dana White said it himself, the only reason they had the big upsurge that it had was because of Ultimate Fighter, which was he said was a complete ripoff of Tough Enough. And, Spike TV had contacted WWE and wanted to do Tough Enough, and they said no. And that opened the door for Dana White to do Ultimate Fighter and have the boom of UFC that they've had.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
Absolutely. And before I throw it back to Jack again, as we get towards the end of this interview, I want to ask you about the invasion angle that took place during your time off television. And I just want to know, from your perspective, if you could explain how you felt they handled the angle and what you would have done differently.
Well, it's assumption and supposition and speculation, and it's just my opinion. But, one of the things that Vince has always done really well, and I think he could not break himself out of, is if you come from somewhere else, even if you were Ric Flair and you came from somewhere else, you weren't put immediately at the top of the card in WWE. The biggest mistakes that I see AEW making today are the same mistakes that TNA made. And that is, you'll take a mid-card guy from WWE and you'll take him and put him at the top of your card in one of these other companies. What did you just tell all the fans? You just told all the fans a mid-card guy is better than everyone else on your show.
Yeah.
So who has the better product? So
Exactly.
Subconsciously, you're telling everyone that WWE is better than you.
Yeah.
By doing that, where they'd be much better benefited to bring in that mid-card guy. Let your top guy beat him. Now make him fight his way up from the bottom or the middle all the way back up to the top. And now he's one of yours. And that's what Vince would always do. And he used that same mindset when the invasion angle came in, as opposed to letting them come in and dominate WWE, creating heat. Heat's not a spot in a match. Heat's not an offense. Heat's a want or a need, where the audience would want to see WWE triumph over these invaders. But you have to first take a back seat and let the invaders get the upper hand, which is what they did in WCW with Hall and Nash and the Outsiders. They came in and dominated, which made the audience want to see somebody finally build up and knock them off. And that's what they should have done with the invading companies of ECW. And, you know, especially when Shane was heading it up, it should have been Shane comes in and Shane runs roughshod over, you know, but the biggest problem though was that they didn't have a lot of the big major stars that they would have needed to be able to pull that angle off in the exchange, because a lot of those guys were setting out their contracts being paid to just sit at home. So if you don't have the tools, if you don't have the army, it's hard to go to war with. So
yep, I agree.
I agree.
Back to you, Jack.
Speaking of sort of relating to the alliance of WCW and ECW, in 2006, the relaunch of ECW doesn't go so well. You were also on the roster, but only used sporadically. What could WWE have done differently to make it work, in your opinion?
Nothing.
Nothing?
Nothing. You all romanticize ECW. You're all such dumb shits.
Oh no.
Because you don't have a clue. You don't have a clue of how the wrestling business really works.
No.
ECW worked because it was the right thing at the right time for the right reason, and there was an audience there. The reason it didn't work a second time in WWE is because WWE is geared to a general audience, to a mass audience. ECW was marketed to a niche audience. Remember the conversation we had about Job Squad and Steve Austin?
Yeah.
So WWE is Steve Austin and ECW is the Job Squad. It's marketed to a niche audience, very small, very secular, small percentage of the population. So it's like producing a comic book movie. For those of us that have read comic books and know the characters, backstories, etc., we're going to buy a ticket. We know that, right? But if they only produce the movie to where it appeals to just us, they're going to lose money, because how much does it take to produce a movie? How many millions of dollars? And they're doing it for one reason, it's to make a profit. So now they need to balance and create a product that appeals to and doesn't turn off that hardcore fan audience, but at the same time allows a general audience to pick up and get involved with the characters and care about and invest to the point that where they spend their money to want to see it and then return to see the subsequent sequels. Because the way they're going to really make their money is when they start to make a franchise in the movie industry. But if you just try to appeal to a small portion of those fans, it won't work. With WWE, they couldn't remanufacture because, one, the time had passed. Two, a lot of the talent were no longer a part of it. And three, they were trying to balance between a general audience and trying to keep that niche market appeal, and you can't do both at the same time.
Very good point.
I just want to jump in here, Jack, and ask Al if me and Jack as wrestling fans, I hope that throughout this interview you've seen that we admit that we don't know how the wrestling business works, and then as opposed to the normal wrestling fan that you see that thinks they know it all. I hope that at least comes across to you that we are aware.
Sure, I just trying to help to people to understand, so that sometimes it helps to eliminate some of their frustration. You know, I always, you know, because that question comes up all the time. Well, why didn't ECW work? And it's like you romanticize it. You got to remember, ECW went out of business, and the reason it went out of business is for the very reason that it was successful, because it was just to a very niche market. You know, and that's the problem with a lot of wrestling and a lot of wrestlers and a lot of wrestling fans, is that they think that it should just be marketed to only that audience and no one else. And it's like, well, you can't survive. You just can't make money that way.
Exactly right.
And if you can't make money, you go under. It's that simple. And you can't listen. The trick today is, because it's a much more challenging time. The trick today is that you've got to try to market to a broad audience, but you've got to offer in some way, some distinct manner. You've got to offer something that's completely different than WWE. Because if you don't, you're just going to be WWE light, and nobody. I can't emphasize this enough. No one is going to beat WWE at being at WWE. It's not going to happen.
Never.
They've got just too many resources. They've got too much experience, too much talent. You can take some ideas and some techniques and things, but you have to create your own vibe, your own feel, your own unique way of doing things. But you can't just market to the wrestling audience either, because for one, WWE is kind of doing that now, and NXT is definitely doing that. They're marketing to just a wrestling audience, and then ROH is marketing to just a wrestling audience. Impact Wrestling is marketing to just a wrestling audience.
Yeah.
AEW is marketing to just a wrestling audience. They're not to the average fan, not to the Mr. and Mrs. Tesco or Costco or Walmart. They're not marketing to them. They're marketing to a wrestling fan, which is fine. But the problem is there's only so many of those to go around, only so many fans to go around, and they only have so much money to spend.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to try to find some new ground in, where you are marketing to more of a general audience as much as possible, so that you can have the best chance of survival, because you've got to have the numbers to take care of attrition, where you're going to have, over a certain period of time, fans are going to start to fall out of interest, and then they're going to pick it back up. Or you're going to have some fans that are going to be attending every one of your shows every single time you run, and there are going to be some that are only going to attend every 2 months, and some that are only going to attend every 6 months. But if you have a massive enough audience, enough numbers, there's always a full house. So you're always able to survive and always being able to be profitable.
Yeah.
So that's the trick.
That's why I hate when I hear Cody Rhodes say that the term casual fan makes him sick, and he doesn't care for the casual wrestling fan. I think that's not good for his business. You should care about that if you want to grow it.
Well, that's his choice. This is his decision, and it'll time will bear it out as to whether or not it's the right direction or not. But there's just, for me, there's just not a large enough percentage of them to survive. I know there are more of those casual fans out there, that if I can capture them and I can keep them interested, I'll not only get them, I'll obviously get the wrestling fan as well, and then I'll be able to have a much larger number. So
sorry, Jack, back to you. I didn't mean to interject. I just saw something there that we could branch off to, but keep going, bro.
No, that's great. I've only got one last thing I want to really ask you to also plug or talk about before I throw it back to Carl, before he does 5-second frenzy and wraps it up. I wanted you to talk to me about Collar and Elbow, the independent clothing brand you've been running for independent wrestling. What's that idea come about, and what's the goal with that? Is a sort of an awareness for independent wrestling? Is it a way of getting wrestling out, or is it more a way of combining streetwear and wrestling fans into sort of one thing?
It's really to try and combine streetwear and wrestling fans together, because again, I'm trying to appeal to as large a market as possible. With my partner Rod, when we got to talking about it, we just felt like, as far as wrestling merchandise was concerned, you either had the typical wrestling merchandise, was usually the picture of one of the talent's faces on your chest, which is a middle-aged man. I don't feel like walking around with another guy's face on my chest.
Neither do I.
Carl, you've been saying that for a very long time.
My girlfriend bought me a Ric Flair T-shirt for Christmas once, and I only ever wear it when I go to bed. I don't walk around wearing a Ric Flair shirt with his shirt off.
And the fact that they use the old, the thick, heavy, bulletproof cotton T-shirts, and that were uncomfortable, they don't really fit, and so we just felt like, because football had its own stuff like Under Armour, and basketball had Nike, and all these different things. All the fans had something. It just felt like we needed to do something for wrestling, and we wanted to create some designs that appealed like Tap Out used to. It was the MMA thing.
Yep.
But if you were Tap Out, if you wore a Tap Out shirt and you weren't an MMA fan, you didn't hear people going, "Hey, what's up? Is that MMA?" They thought, "Oh, that's a cool shirt." And that's what I really wanted to do with Collar and Elbow was, we've all been there. Wrestling fans, we wear a shirt that, we like because it represents something in wrestling. And somebody, you go to a party or something, the guy goes, hey man, you like professional wrestling? That's fake. And it's like, really? Well, thank you, Angela Lansbury, Murder, She Wrote. How long did it take for you to put the clues together to figure that out? No kidding. Wow. You have just stunned me. I'm going to leave now because I've just experienced a life-altering revelation. I really appreciate that. It's like, shut up. Of course it knows. It's predetermined. But now if you create designs and they have some aspect of wrestling in it, if you're a wrestling fan, you get it. You're like, oh man, that's cool. If you're not a wrestling fan, you go, hey, that's just a cool shirt. Where did you get it? Okay. And so that's what we wanted to try to do, was try to create something like that. And then we came up with, because the hardest part of a new business is marketing, because you gotta market your product, but if you spend too much, you're turned upside down, you can't make a profit, you go under. So we thought of a mutually beneficial way, which was hilarious when we first started doing it, because everybody's like, oh, this is a pyramid scheme. I'm like, clearly you've never Googled what a pyramid scheme is, you moron. Because if you had, you'd understand this is nowhere near that. But like a lot of independent wrestlers, and I tell the guys in OVW still today, like they'll be, oh, I want to buy t-shirts. I want to sell t-shirts. I'm like, don't buy them until you're truly over. Because unless you're over, you're going to end up with a box of t-shirts that you've spent several $100s on that you're not going to be able to sell. It's just a fact. You're going to sell a few to your friends and family, and then you're going to be sitting with those up in the attic 22 years from now. So just don't do it. But if we have a wrestler, an independent wrestler, he doesn't have a name, he doesn't have his own merch, but we give him a code and he gets a t-shirt that he wears and he promotes on social media, and he gets a code, and then for every t-shirt he sells, he gets 40% of the profit, which is $5. Okay. So if he sells 100 t-shirts, he gets $500, which helps him to make it to the next town, to have gas money, to be able to keep doing his career, if he just goes out there and he hustles. Now, if is the biggest word in the English language. It's only 2 letters, but it carries so much weight, because if a frog had wings, he wouldn't bump his ass. So I can't tell you the number of people that I have literally given a code to and give them a t-shirt that they can then utilize to make money. And you'll see them wear every other t-shirt, like Adidas, Nike, Puma, Under Armour, that will not pay them one dime for wearing. But if they wore theirs and promoted it and got people to buy it, they'd made $5 a shirt and actually have some money. And they can't even do that. That's how lazy they are. But
so
if you wear it to the show, you're out at your merch stand, somebody goes, oh, that's a cool shirt. Where'd you get it? And you go, boom, here's my business card. Here's the code. Send it in. You get 10% off. Motivate them to use the code. You sell. You get a check the very next, month payout of how much you've sold for each shirt, and you get, you get paid for your PayPal. It was simple, and it was a brilliant way to market the brand and get people to know it, be aware of it, and to want to buy the shirt. It just, the downfall was getting the wrestlers to, one, trust and believe that there was not some kind of scam being pulled, and 2, which is just, I was accused of it being a Ponzi scheme at one point.
Oh, wow.
Like, again, there's this thing in your pocket called a phone. You've had this beautiful thing called a Google. You can just look up Ponzi scheme, and if you have any common sense, you'll realize it's not that. It was ridiculous. There was a big to do about it, and oh my God, it was just, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Just
incredible.
Only in wrestling.
Just gotta be kidding me. Only in wrestling.
Al, I know we've taken up a lot of your time so far, so I've got 3 questions, quick fire, before I do a little segment we call 5-Second Frenzy. First of all, What would the ideal scenario be for you to have your final match, and what would you like that to be?
Somewhere where I make lots and lots of money.
Yeah.
That'd be it.
That's it.
That's
Anyone in mind that you'd like to wrestle? Maybe Bob?
or Kurt. I think Kurt and I could have put on some really good matches, because he'd be aggressive enough, and
Yeah.
I could work really well with Kurt, I think.
Do you think the WWE Hall of Fame will ever come calling?
No.
Well, they should, because you're brilliant.
No, they won't.
You're fucking brilliant.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Before we get to 5-second frenzy, which I'll explain in a minute, I want you
Sure.
to at least tell everyone out there about the Al Snow Wrestling Academy, and also talk about what
Sure.
you're doing with OVW, and what your hopes and dreams are for Ohio Valley Wrestling.
I bought Ohio Valley Wrestling, or OVW, 2 years ago, for the express purpose of creating standards with wrestling and wrestling training. I think a large part of the problem within professional wrestling now is that there is such a proliferation of wrestling schools, in the fact that there are no requirements or no real standards set for who can be in the business anymore. Back when I was trained, you were held accountable as to who you trained. You were responsible. They carried your reputation with them, and you wanted to make sure that they represented you in the best possible light, because if they didn't, it would affect the way you made a living. Now, we're all such whores that, if you have the money, they've got the time, and anybody can train anybody. All they have to do is set up a ring and put it in the building, and ta-da, I'm a wrestling trainer.
Yeah.
So, it upset me so bad, because what was happening was, and I'll try to make this as brief as possible, but that year, I forget what year it was, but a young man out in Oklahoma, where a commissioned state boxing wrestling commission oversees everything, poorly trained, very barely trained, got in the ring, had a match with somebody who was poorly trained, did a sidewalk slam, hit the back of the head, had brain swelling, was in a coma for several days, and then died. The number of people that either have a life-altering injury or have a life-ending injury has been growing exponentially over the last few years, because of the fact that there are no standards, and it's poor training or lack of training, because everybody just assumes, well, I'm a fan, I've been watching it for so many years, I know what to do. Nothing could be further from the truth. In the United States, if you want to be a licensed vocation, be it masseuse, beautician, barber, mortician, you've got to go to a state accredited school with a state accredited teacher. There's standards.
Yeah.
And there aren't any in professional wrestling. And I contacted several state athletic commissions, and they ignored me. And, I approached the Kentucky Boxing Wrestling Commission, and same thing. They were very short-sighted. They ignored me.
Yeah.
And so things kind of fell together. My partner, Chad Miller, and I, we bought OVW, and took us about a year and a half, and a lot of time and a lot of money, a lot of effort, but we're the only accredited trade school for professional wrestling, sports entertainment, and broadcasting in the world now.
Wow.
So we have an actual state accreditation as a trade school. We have state accredited teachers. That means we have to meet state set standards for education. We can't just throw you in the ring and just, like most people, teach you how to land properly, hit the ropes. Here's a couple wrestling moves. Here's how a couple spots are done. Now you can go wrestle. I'm tired of that, because of being around on the independents. And I'm not even talking about aesthetically, but I've seen so many people that are standing in the locker room and they're not physically in any possible ring condition in any way, which now every time you go in the ring anyways, you're going to have a risk, a chance of potentially injuring yourself or your opponent to some degree. And that risk goes up as the more or less prepared you are. And if you're poorly trained, you don't have timing, distance, footwork, you're not practiced, you're physically not in condition, 8 minutes in, you're chugging like a train, and you're wanting to do that cool high spot for no other reason than because you just saw it earlier that week on Raw and you think it's cool and you want to do it. And now your opponent might have a chance of getting hurt, or you may too. And, you know, I think it's an insult, bar none. Here's another controversial thing. It might draw some attention, but I think people who treat it that way, it's insulting. You know, if you can't, you know, your aspirations aren't to go to WWE, which is fine. There were people back in the day that didn't work in wrestling full time. Not many, but there were those guys that just did it, you know, on the weekends and things like that when they could, a part-time basis. They always treated it as a profession, as being a professional. They were always prepared. They were in shape, and the ones that weren't were ran off because they were an insult to the business. And with the fact that the schools nowadays, anybody can just, oh, I'm a trainer, you know, they're taking these young men and women's money, you know, and I implore anybody who wants to get trained to do your homework, find someone who has genuine experience. If your goal is to go to WWE, find somebody that's been in WWE. If your goal is to travel internationally and wrestle internationally, find someone who's done that made a career of it. You know, if your goal is just to become a professional wrestler and you get trained by somebody that we call them a 40 kilometer or 50 kilometer, which means they don't go that far, no further than that from their house every weekend, that's all the experience they're going to have. And they're not going to know or understand or have made mistakes to be able to communicate to you to how when you get an opportunity overseas or in WWE or Impact or somewhere else to be able to fully take advantage of it because they've never been there themselves.
Yeah.
You know, find some place where they're actually going to take the time and make you invest in yourself. They're going to take the time and make you work for it, because being a professional wrestler should be an elite thing. It should be difficult. It should not be where everyone who wants to do it can do it. It should be a challenge, just like rugby, just like all, you know, every other professional sports. Not everybody is cut out to do it. And professional wrestling was at one time that way and should still be today. And it's not. It's now, there are, I forget the numbers, 900 and I forget how many thousand, 900 and some thousand professional wrestlers worldwide. There are in the United States alone over 110. In the state of Kentucky alone, there are over 1,100 licensed professional wrestlers. In the entire world, as far as actual jobs in there in front of a camera that pay more than 50 grand a year, there are only 560.
Whoa.
What are you going to do to be one of those?
Yeah.
And if you're not willing to do it, don't lie to yourself. If you're not willing to do the things that people don't do to live a life that other people don't live, then don't do it. Don't lie to yourself, and don't let somebody tell you that they can give you the skills if they've never been there and had the experience themselves, because they can't.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, you did the right thing by contacting the athletic commissions to try and get some of these clowns to stop teaching people how to wrestle, without a doubt, as far as I'm concerned, because there's too many of them, and there's a lot in Australia as well.
Oh boy.
Well, and some of them are going to say, well, you know, you're doing that because you just, you know, you're now competition. You're not competition to me.
No.
I'll tell you that right now. I operate on a whole different level. Okay. We produce we're on episode almost 1,200 weekly television episodes. I try to run an actual territory here where people can make a living being a professional wrestler and nothing else, not running one show a month, you know, and bringing in some guy. I actually try to run and operate on a regular, consistent basis and build a territory. I have an affiliation with a national television network here in the United States. I now have, where we're in about 12 to 13 different countries internationally. We have our own Roku channel. We're building a platform that you as a professional wrestler could come and capitalize on and get opportunities around the world that no one else has. That's what I'm trying to build here. I'm not here to just run my weekly show that my friends and family can show up and put me over and go, oh, that was great. Or get a write-up in one of the newsletters that says, oh, he's really underrated, he's underutilized. No, my job is to try to create something that all of the people that perform for me can have the best opportunity to exploit to go to the next level. So they can get the experience and understanding so that if they get an opportunity in, say, in WWE, or they get an opportunity overseas, they'll be prepared to take advantage of that opportunity to its fullest.
Amazing. And we'll be speaking to one of your OVW friends, Ryan Howe, on Sunday for the podcast. Really looking forward to that because I think that guy's just fantastic.
Oh yeah, terrific, very talented guy.
So Al, we'll finish this off with a little segment that I like to call 5-Second Frenzy, where you have 5 seconds to answer each question. It's just a quick fire kind of thing. And even if you break the 5 seconds, there's nothing I can do about it because we're on the other side of the world. And I'm red wine drunk at the moment. So here we go. Al, favorite match that you ever had?
Haven't had it yet.
Ooh.
Excellent. Favorite opponent that you ever had?
God, Benoit, Candido, Bob Holly. There were a couple older guys that you wouldn't know. George South, Ricky and Robert. Lots of guys.
What's your favorite meal or food?
I love pizza.
Nice.
Love pizza.
Me too.
Nice.
What's your favorite film?
A Christmas Story.
What's your favorite TV show?
Right now, I'm digging Doom Patrol.
Doom Patrol. I'll have to check that out. I haven't heard of that one. Your favorite alcoholic beverage?
Bourbon.
Nice.
Your
favorite female body part?
It's a good one.
Probably from head to toe.
Nice.
Nice. Very good. And lastly, your favorite curse word?
That'd have to be fuck. I consider fuck to be like the Swiss Army knife of curse words. It can be used in so many different ways and so many different times, and is pretty much appropriate in every situation. So
that's correct.
It feels so good to say as well. Fuck, Jack. Say it. Say fuck, Jack.
Fuck. There you go.
Okay, Al. Now you say fuck. You say fuck too.
Yeah, it all depends on the inflection. Like you go fuck, or you can go fuck. It's awesome.
That was awesome, man.
Truly multi-purpose.
Like a Swiss Army knife, multi-purpose. Awesome. Al, thank you so much for your time tonight. You only said you were only going to give us an hour. This has now been an hour and 40 minutes. Coming just over about that.
Shit.
So, yep.
Wow. And we are so appreciative of your time tonight. And you've told some amazing stories. I've listening to you, I've learned a lot as well. Even as just a fan, I've learned a lot as well as how some of my friends as professional wrestlers, should probably act or, take things on. And, I've just really appreciated the way you've put things as well as just, explaining your point of views on certain things as well. It's been really great to hear your side of things. And I can tell you would be an absolute amazing trainer, and all the students would be lucky to have you sort of showing them the way. So that's it.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.
The more Al Snow's voice and his opinions go out in public, the better the world is because everybody fucking learns.
It's all about learning.
Well, that's my opinion. So, and if anybody wants to follow, you can, follow us. You can go to ovwrestling.com for more information, or aswa.live for the school. There's all kinds of information there. If you want to follow me, you can follow me at The Real Al Snow on all of the social media, because yes, there were some fakes, and I would message you if you were to fake being me, and I'd just simply tell you, aim the bar higher. If you're going to be a celebrity, going to fake being a celebrity, try like Brad Pitt or George Clooney or somebody like that.
That's an awesome response to it, man. Again, thank you so much for your time. This has been 55 Live with Al Snow. I'm Mr. 55 Jack Wallace. This is California Fury. Say goodbye, Carl.
See ya.
And that's it from us. So see you later.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Al.